I want to tell you about a feeling. It's the feeling of having two people live inside your skin. One of them is the person you show to the world. This person smiles, they go to work, they answer the phone and say they are doing fine. They look normal. They might even look happy. The other person is a secret. This person lives behind your eyes. They are tired. They are in pain. They are carrying a weight that no one else can see. This person is the one who knows the truth of your body, the truth of your mind. They are with you when the lights go out, when you are alone in your car, when you are staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night. Most of us have a little of this, a public face and a private one. But what happens when the distance between these two people grows so wide it becomes a canyon? What happens when the person smiling for the world is a stranger to the person screaming on the inside? This is not a story about being fake. It is a story about survival. It's about what it takes to get through a day, a week, a year, when your own body feels like a foreign country. It's about the silent, invisible war that so many of us are fighting. A war that has no name, no clear enemy, and no obvious wounds for others to see. It is just a deep, private struggle to keep going. Imagine there is a ghost living in your house. It flickers the lights. It makes noises in the walls. It moves things when you are not looking. At first, you think you are imagining it. Then, you start to believe it's real. But when you tell people, they don't see it. They don't hear it. They look at you with concern. They suggest you are just tired or stressed. After a while, you start to believe them. Maybe the ghost isn't real. Maybe the problem is just you. Now, imagine that house is your body. For years, Selma Blair lived with a ghost. She was, in her own words, deeply unhappy and rather unwell for most of her life. This was true even when she was successful, even when she was living a life others might dream of. The ghost had many forms. Sometimes it was a deep, physical pain in her legs and neck, so intense she felt she couldn't even sit on a plane. Other times, it was a fog in her mind that made it hard to think. The ghost played tricks with her emotions. She would wake up in the middle of the night with loud, rolling laughter coming out of her for no reason at all. Then, as she got older, the laughter was replaced by crying that would come and go without warning. She was an actress, and she learned to manage these strange storms inside her. She figured she was just wacky or unbridled. She went to doctors, searching for answers. For a long time, the pain was blamed on sadness. Her exhaustion after her son was born was called postpartum depression. Her years of confusing symptoms were often dismissed as being psychosomatic, a physical reaction to mental stress. This is a heavy thing to be told. It suggests the pain isn't quite real. It suggests that if you could just fix your mind, your body would be fine. When you hear this enough, you can start to believe it. She even came to agree with them. She was so confused by the constant, shifting symptoms that she accepted the story that it was all in her head. The ghost was winning. It made her feel misunderstood and alone. The world saw an actress, a mother, a functioning person. But inside, her days and nights had become a living hell, a private world of pain and exhaustion that no one else could see or name. The ghost was real, but it had no name. And a ghost without a name is impossible to fight. There is a point where quiet suffering becomes a loud alarm, a point where the body can no longer pretend. For Selma, that point came after her son was born in 2011. The unnamed ghost grew stronger. It was no longer just a fog or a strange mood. It was a physical breakdown. The fatigue was bone deep. She described being so tired she would almost fall asleep at traffic lights. This wasn't just the normal tiredness of a new mother. This was something else. This was her body shutting down. At the same time, she was trying to breastfeed her son full-time, giving him as much as she could because she felt it was the one thing she could do right. She felt like she was dying, like the life was being drained out of her. Her son, in a moment of childhood honesty, called her milk boob soup. It was his favorite food, and so she kept going. She was the bar, and he was a customer who always wanted more. Her body began to fail in new ways. She developed a dead leg and a tremor. The pain in her face, a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, became a constant companion. A deep stiffness took over her body. She used to drink alcohol to numb the hurt, to find a brief escape in oblivion, but she had stopped. Now, there was no escape. Her movements became jerky and uncontrolled. Her speech started to falter. Her vision blurred. Writing became impossible. The letters would just stack on top of each other into a single, tiny dot. She couldn't stay awake long enough to read a book. Sometimes, when she was just sitting still, she would be hit with such intense vertigo that it felt like the earth was opening up beneath her. She would scream, then laugh, then cry. People saw these things and drew their own conclusions. They thought she was drinking again. She wasn't. She was just trying to survive inside a body that was betraying her in 100 different ways. The private war was no longer private. The symptoms were spilling out into the open for everyone to see and misunderstand. Her body was sending out a desperate signal. It was a signal that could no longer be explained away as just sadness or stress. It was the breaking point. Imagine you have been lost in the woods for years. Every rustle of leaves sounds like a threat. Every shadow looks like a monster. You are scared, but you are also tired of being scared. Then, one day, a bear walks out from behind a tree. It is huge. It is real. It is terrifying. But in that moment of terror, you feel something else too. Relief. Because now you know the name of what you have been running from. The monster is not in your head. It is right in front of you. On a warm August night in 2018 at 11:30 p.m., Selma Blair's doctor gave her monster a name. He told her she had relapsing multiple sclerosis. The news was, in her words, liberating. This is a strange word to use for an incurable condition, but for someone who had spent a lifetime feeling misunderstood, the diagnosis was a form of freedom. It was wonderful and bewildering. It was proof. It was a clear medical reason for the pain, the fatigue, the fog, and the tears. It was a name for the ghost. For years, she carried two conflicting ideas in her head. The first idea was from her body: I am sick. Something is very wrong. The second idea was from the world: you are fine. It is just stress. It is just sadness. Holding these two thoughts at the same time creates a kind of mental friction, a deep internal stress. A diagnosis ends that friction. It erases one of the stories. The story that she was just imagining it, that she was weak, that it was her fault. That story was finally proven false. The doctor told her that her brain already showed at least 25 years of damage. This news was awful, but it was also a validation. It meant the ghost had been with her since she was young. The pain she felt as a girl, the strange moods, the things no one could explain, they were real. They were all part of this one long story. The diagnosis was not a cure. It was a map. It showed her where she was. It showed her what she was facing. The bear was out of the woods. It was still a bear, and it was still dangerous. But now, at least, she knew what she was fighting. The fear of the unknown was replaced by the reality of the known. And in that terrible reality, there was a strange and awful kind of relief. The night she was diagnosed, the doctor told her two things. First, that she had MS with 25 years of damage. Second, that she needed to check into a hospital the next day. He said her plan to get on a plane in a few hours for a film shoot could not be done. Her response was simple. She told him it would be impossible to go to the hospital. She had a shoot to get to. She looked at the situation with a strange kind of logic. MS is a lifelong condition, she said. So what's the rush? What could be done for her right now anyway? The show must go on. And so, just hours after learning she had a serious neurological disease, she got on the plane. Why would someone do this? Why would you choose work over your health at a moment like that? The answer is not about being brave or being reckless. It is about habit. For decades, Selma's job was to be an actress. Her identity was tied to her work. The habit of showing up, of performing, of pushing through pain, was etched into her very being. She had always known some version of this struggle with her nervous system. So, in a way, this was just another day of pushing through. When faced with a terrifying new reality, we often cling to old, familiar routines. The diagnosis was a massive, life-altering earthquake. It changed everything. But the habit of going to work? That was solid ground. That was something she knew how to do. The hospital represented a new life, the life of a patient. The film set represented her old life, the life of an actress. She chose the one she knew. It is a powerful instinct. We build our lives around these roles we play. Mother, father, employee, artist. These roles give us structure and purpose. When a crisis hits, that structure can feel like the only thing holding us together. Her decision to get on that plane was not a denial of her illness. It was the act of a person trying to hold on to who they were for just a little bit longer. It was the unbreakable habit of putting the show ahead of the self, because for so long, The show was all she knew. We often think of suffering as a lonely place, a private room that no one else can enter. But sometimes, a window opens, and through that window, we see someone else who understands. We see a reflection of our own struggle in their story. And in that moment, we feel a little less alone. For Selma, one of those windows was the life and loss of her friend, the writer and actress, Carrie Fisher. When Carrie died, Selma cried and asked for her to come see her somehow. She couldn't see her in person, but she could visit her in her films and reread her books. In Carrie's work, she found a kindred spirit. She saw so many parallels between their lives. She remembered watching Carrie's one-woman show, where she stood on stage and said, "I am Carrie Fisher, and I am 52 years old." Selma was also 52 when she was giving this talk. They both lived lives of extreme highs and extreme lows. They both fought their own battles with addiction and pain, but the connection was deeper than that. She felt they both shared something important. For better or worse, they were true to themselves. They also both felt a need to talk openly about their struggles, to help lessen the stigmas that other people face. They knew what it was like to be judged, to be misunderstood, and they used their voices to make the path a little easier for others. This is a powerful form of connection. When you are going through something difficult, you look for a map, and sometimes the only map you can find is the story of someone who has walked a similar road. Their story doesn't solve your problems. It doesn't take away your pain, but it does something just as important. It validates your experience. It tells you that you are not crazy. You are not the only one. The loss of friends to suicide and illness left her feeling haunted. These sudden departures are a brutal reminder of how fragile life is. But in the stories they leave behind, we can find comfort. We can see our own fight reflected in theirs. We see their courage, and it gives us a little more of our own. We are not alone in the room. There are other people who understand the language of our private war. Getting a diagnosis is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one. It is the start of a long, slow process of learning to live in a body that has a new set of rules. For Selma, this meant understanding a whole host of new conditions that came along with her MS. She was also diagnosed with something called pseudobulbar affect, or PBA. This was the medical name for the uncontrollable laughing and crying she had experienced for so long. She learned that her anemia and other syndromes were often found in people with MS, all contributing to a nervous system gone wrong. She learned that her weak side could switch from right to left, and that her foot would sometimes drop when she walked. She learned that her speech and movement problems, called dystonia, could get worse when she was overstimulated, in the sun, or just focusing too hard. At first, this was confusing for someone who already thought her problems were psychosomatic. But over time, she came to understand her body's new language. She learned to prepare for these episodes, to find relief in silence and sleep. This learning process is not just physical. It is deeply emotional. It involves forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for all the years you felt you let people down, before you had a name for what was wrong. Forgiving yourself for the days you couldn't leave the house because the fatigue was too much. A chronic illness forces you to change. It is a crisis, but sometimes, after a crisis, people can find a new kind of strength. This is sometimes called post-traumatic growth. It is not about being happy that the bad thing happened. It is about finding a new sense of purpose that would not have existed without the struggle. Selma found this by simplifying. She realized she had to cut out the superfluous to make energy for what must be done. Life became more focused. She had to choose where to put her limited energy. She learned to exist more in the present moment because she could trust herself better now. She was learning her own story after so many years. She was rewriting the rules of her own life, not to defeat her illness, but to live with it, as wisely and as peacefully as she could. Our lives are fragile. We can be going about a normal day, searching for our keys in a bag, and be hit with news that changes everything forever. A phone call, a doctor's visit, a sudden accident. The machine of our life is complex and delicate. It can break in an instant. A teenager can be killed in a school parking lot on a Wednesday, leaving behind a grief that ruins everything. We lose our best friends. We lose our parents. We are left with a heart that breaks every day for all of us. Life is so fragile. And yet, our will can be so strong. This is the central paradox of being human. We live with the constant knowledge of loss and pain, but we also have a deep, stubborn ability to endure. We can be blindsided by the worst news imaginable, but we can also feel a moment of grace on any given Thursday. That one moment can set off a chain reaction of hope that keeps the whole thing going. This life is a mix of love and fear, of laughter and howling grief. Nothing stays the same. Everything will change. Incredible things can happen. Horrible things can happen. This is the deal. We do not get to choose the weather of our lives. We only get to choose how we navigate it. Selma Blair's story is not about finding a cure. It is about finding a way to live. It is about learning to be of service, to be humbled by this life, and to be grateful. It is about waking up more tired than when you fell asleep, making mistakes, and trying your best anyway. It is about finding a way to be present, even when it's hard. The final lesson is the simplest one. It is not a grand strategy. It is not a complicated philosophy. It is a quiet, daily practice. It is the decision to face the day, whatever it may hold. It is the small, steady act of putting one foot in front of the other. Keep on showing up.